If you were to ask any furry what is the most debated and argued controversial word in the furry fandom, that word will be feral. Every time that word gets into discussion, you will get people from all sides, ranging from people call you a zoo to it is just a drawing. But what makes this word quote-unquote feral even worse is the vagueness of it. And also quickly explain for those that don't know what feral is. It is art basically labels anything that is four-legged creature pretty much. In this video I will talk about this word and how it is seen in the furry fandom, and also from my observation of people that watch feral art stuff. And when you compare to cub, which will be met with a lot of more negativity and people are more united to dislike it, since the entire concept of the word is drawn minor characters, or looks like it at least. No, the 2000-year-old vampire argument doesn't work. And when it comes to feral, it isn't that straightforward. Here's the thing, if you draw feral art of like a dog, cat, horse or anything resembling a real-life animal, many people will react very strongly and negatively. You might get away with it if it looks very cartoony, but the more realistic the drawing is, the more people will condemn you. But when it comes to quote-unquote feral creatures like dragons, griffins, etc., you will not get the same reaction. It is more ignored, tolerated and accepted. And the reason for that is because these creatures are fantasy, and because they don't exist, it gets a bit harder to judge that person. Of course, this does not apply to all fantasy creatures. If it is a unicorn as an example, people will still see it as the same thing. It is still a horse, but with a horn instead. You don't get away that easy. But if it is a dragon, the majority of people just don't care, and it gets hard to compare them, since in most fictions they are more seen as intelligent creatures equal to humans. Of course, some portray them more as animalistic, but even then, because they do not resemble any real-life animals, maybe a lizard, but come on, by appearance alone they are not comparable at all. Looking back at this, I realize this needs a better clarification than just saying they don't look similar at all. The only similarity is that they both have scales, but almost everything else, especially anatomically, is different. You may now look at my profile picture and say like, oh, you just mentioned dragons because you have a bias. Okay, yes, true. But what I'm saying is still right, and is the most relevant argument against feral, because every time feral gets into discussion, dragons are ignored, mainly referencing feral that depicts real-life animals, or at least looks very similar. And when it comes to those rare cases of people that are against quote-unquote feral dragons, it is mainly by people that are naive, because dragons are labeled as quote-unquote feral, so they think it is equally as bad.
What about dragons? What about this? You know, what about the like feral dragons? Like, I don't want to go into that, honestly. It's in this gray area where it's like, well, dragons don't exist in real life. It's probably less worse, but it's still pretty yikesy, and you probably should go seek help.
Because my OC is a dragon, or you will say as feral, I guess, I have a lot of experience with other dragon scales in the fandom, and we are usually quite isolated in the furry fandom. We dragons interact mainly with other dragons. If you look at someone with a dragon OC at their friend group, it is uncommon to find someone that is another species than a dragon, because they are like 80-90% of that friend group. And people with a dragon OC that like they mainly like other dragons or other draconic looking creatures, since people with dragon OCs are less likely, from my experience, to like feral outside draconic looking creatures. Dragons are the perfect example of criteria not being controversial, quote-unquote feral, in the furry fandom, since it does not resemble any real-life animal. It is depicted as an intelligent creature in many fictions. It doesn't look like an animal that can be compared to real life. It is very rare and unlikely to find people with a dragon OC to be a zoo. The species is very popular, and so combining all of those things together, which at this point, dragon basically become immune to this controversy, and should come to question if we even should include them in such a controversial in the fandom. Again, yes, I have a bias for them, but they are honestly the best example of this. They are one of the biggest reasons why the word feral is disputed and should be discussed. I don't think it is fair to put two different species with a huge difference of reputation in the same category. So instead, to demonstrate, I made a level system as an example. The lower the level is, the higher percentage of furries you will meet is against this type of feral. So let's mention the level graph I made. Okay, so I just want to quickly mention that this level thing is not 100% accurate representation. I just want to give everyone a general perspective on how most furries see feral art. And it doesn't mean that because I place one type of feral in a certain level, doesn't it mean you have to tolerate that more or agree with the placement, and that this feral is better than this feral, if you get my meaning. And I'm also going to mention the word animals often. When I mean compared to animals, I mean only real life non-sapient animals as an example, nothing else. But let's continue the video. On level 5, which I mentioned before, we have dragons as an example, which we can also include like griffins, griffons, which is not that as common as dragons in the furry fandom, but they seem to fall in the same line. But on level 4, it is now starting to get a bit more questionable. In this level we can include creatures like felkins, dinosaurs, and it can be any weird alien looking creatures. Dinosaurs might be quite surprising for you to hear, since they are basically real life animals, but the reason they get away with it being in this level because they don't exist anymore, and in the furry fandom they are so fictionalized and unrecognizable to the point, can you even call them accurate dinosaurs? But also in real life they are quite ambiguous. So yeah. Anyway, creatures in this level do have an animalistic feeling to it, if I even say it right, but they still feel too fictional and aliens, so they get a pass by most furries. Level 3. Here we can basically take most Pokemon species that are ferals. So yeah, in this tier, it is creatures at this point you can say they feel like an animal, you can resemble to real life. It is still fictional, but you can look at this and be like, dude, isn't that a dog? Now on level 2, these creatures at this point are just straight up animals that can correlate to real life animals or looks very similar, like I mentioned before, like a unicorn. And what they get away with is that in this level these characters are depicted as an intelligent creatures in the way they move, being able to speak, and expression. Level 1. Okay, at this point it is the art straight up depicting life. You cannot convince me regardless of your argument or excuse. At the lowest level it is just animals with no sapient intelligence. So instead, I have a suggestion. I know this is controversial for me to say, but maybe, just maybe, we should just get rid of the word feral completely and instead split them up in categories that label them properly, because this word is just so vague. Like when you look at a cat, do you say like, look, a feral cat? No, you don't. You say it is either a cat or an animal. Or when it is a monkey, do they even classify as feral because they are bipedal even though they are an animal? The word anthro makes at least sense because it is anything anthropomized. Or when you see a dolphin and be like, look guys, it is a feral dolphin. Don't you see how ridiculous it sounds? Just say that it's a dolphin. If it is a cat, then say it is a cat. And if it is anthropomized, then say anthrocat. Why not use labels? That makes sense. Just say it is a wolf. We're not adding this word to it. Why do we even use this term to begin with? Like, think about this for a moment. Does this made up slang word even need to exist in the furry fandom? But moving on, I have already talked about the level 4 and 5, why it is not as controversial. But now I want to talk from my observation of people that like feral art, from level 1 to 3, especially people that like level 1. So those that like lower level, quote unquote, feral art, the more it resembles an actual animal and the more realistic the art piece is, the more likely that person is a real life zoo. But the more alien, non-existent and fictionalized it is, then that statistic is reversed. And this is not something I made up or something, because most zoo profile I searched on Twitter and Blue Sky are people retweeting art from feral artists that draw straight up zoo art. So yeah, it is not surprising when you think of it. But I also noticed that I have to question these artists. Why are you feral artists not blocking these people? And I think it is especially even more important when you draw this kind of art that you at least do the minimum you condemn real life zoo. I take Dark Violet as an example. I think this person is probably one of the biggest feral artists, and I see him posting stuff like keep furry weird, which is also a weird vague term in the furry fandom, which I both agree and disagree at the same time. It just depends on the context. But what do you, Dark Violet, consider as quote unquote keep furry weird? Does that also expand to these people that are actual zoos that follow, retweet and comment on your posts without blocking them? Then no. I have seen you do virtue signaling before. Can that not include like you put a do not interact zoos or make a public statement that you don't support real life zoo, which you have done neither, and it is not a hard thing to do, you know. I also think it is even more important that you make that statement, especially when you have posted this kind of questionable stuff in your social medias. But moving on to something else, I made a report on Furfinity last year, in which I searched for accounts of people that were actual zoos for a video. I have decided to unlist the video now, but I reported these zoos, which I got them permanently banned, and these accounts all had in common was that they liked feral. And the thing is that I found no one that only liked exclusively anthro art that was zoos. All of them were people who liked feral canines creatures the most, which may just be a coincidence, but dogs just seem in general to be the most popular animal for zoos, and I will say horses are the most secondary fucking popular. I have never interacted with zoos in my life, but my friend Furry has. 2 other people that were zoos, but both of them were commissioners. Interestingly, one that liked feral horses and one that liked feral felines, which both Furry obviously got contact with after that. So from my observation, it seems to be accurate that the lower the level the person is, on my graph, it is more likely that person is a zoo. I also want to mention a report I made on FA of another zoo some months ago, which I planned for a video, but I later decided to scrap. Although it bothered me enough to bring up in this video. I thought that, you know, these 3 got banned with no problem. I thought this person would be easily as banned, because this guy made a zoo drawing of a real life zoo actress. Yes, for real. And how I found out was really simple, because I searched for the actress name, he wrote not directly but indirectly, like actress and the name of the actress. I thought it could just be a regular actress. I scrolled down on Google Images and found an image with the dog and of the real life zoo actress. And that was enough, and immediately reported to FA staff. I did not even directly search for her with keywords of zoo words to find actual zoo stuff, but it still showed up. And it makes me also wonder why Google has not blacklisted zoo stuff yet. What the f, Google? Why do you still people allowed to search for this degenerate stuff even indirectly? Just ban it, please. Anyway, this has gotten off topic. So did they ban an artist? Yes, but only for 1 week. Are you kidding with me? This guy is an actual zoo, which I even reinforced with the evidence from E6 and R34. On E6 he even got banned for real life zoo, but that seemed to not be enough for some reason, and came up with the biggest reason from the TOS. I do not give a f about your terms and service say here for Affinity. There's no excuse whatever your TOS says for having him on the platform. Just ban him! Anyway, getting that out of my chest, let's move on. It is interesting how inconsistent the morals are in the Furry fandom when it comes to feral, because I want to compare 2 different YouTubers that involve feral in some type of way, and to show you how stupid it is, and the Furry fandom have to get this shit together. I also want to say, do not take this me as attacking these creators, I just want to use them as an example to make a point. So let's start with ArtblockStudio. ArtblockStudio is a furry animator that makes male animation memes and about warrior cats, but that is irrelevant. What actually matters is that ArtblockStudio is also a NSV artist too, but doing it in a separate place and alias, so finding those images doesn't get as easy to find. So not like minors stumble upon those inappropriate drawings. But ArtblockStudio mainly does Antro NSV art, but she got offered to do a commission from someone that offered a lot of money to do a feral NSV of 2 warrior cats characters. And this art started a drama in which people searched for her other feral art, which made this blow upside the proportion for her audience, which made many start calling her a zoo and disliking the fact that she drew feral, which then made her do a response video trying to defend her case. She explained her case and background behind this picture. I don't remember much from the video, since the original video is either deleted or private now, and only have this screenshot from Internet Archive. But yeah, from what I remember is that she explained the entire story behind the feral art, and she was offered a lot of money for this art piece, and that is the story of why people got upset by this. But now let's compare this to Skuru, which in my opinion, this is even worse, but no one has bet an eye to this and just straight up ignored. So Skuru is a reaction channel that reacts to TikToks and then uploads to YouTube. It is like one of the easiest and laziest contents you can do on YouTube, but beside the point. He has this sheepdog character as a Fursona, where he put obvious cropped of his Fursona as a thumbnail, which is already questionable on its own. And with this character, he also has feral art, which is something you can easily find on the Funny Number website, which there's multiple art depicting his Fursona as feral, which even have feral art both depicting his character having feral on Anthro and Anthro on feral. And not only that, he even uses cropped feral art on the thumbnail. And on the description you can literally find the artist he commissioned that made it. And the artist draws feral, which many of these depict level 1 feral art. And this is someone Skuru has also commissioned frequently. How has the anti-feral crowd not got into your radar? Why does ArtblockStudio, that separates their NSFW content from the YouTube audience, get this backlash from an art piece she got offered a lot of money that is mild in comparison to what Skuru is doing, which portray this stuff more graphically, realistic and also frequently? How has the anti-feral crowd not called out Skuru yet for this? And how does this even make any sense? Although do not take this me attacking Skuru, because it is not. This is stuff you yourself, as when publishing this video, you can easily search for yourself. I just want to use him as an example to show how inconsistent and ridiculous the feral controversy is in the furry fandom. Because if we now compare these two, ArtblockStudio looks really tame in comparison, but somehow she got this backlash, but not Skuru. Is it because of the type of audience that watches her is more against this stuff? And those that watch Skuru are people that like this type of content and at least tolerate feral art more? Like, what is going on here?
Doesn't make any sense.
Anyway, know what my personal opinion of feral and all. So this is something you should take with a grain of salt. I'm not qualified to tell you about this, and I'm not a psychologist or a brain scientist or anything, but considering my analysis and from my observation, I think if you watch stuff that depict fantasy and alien creatures to the point it doesn't resemble any real life animals nor can be compared to, I think that is mostly fine, and it will also be hypocritical for me to be against that. But if you watch feral art that resembles real life animals like dogs, cats and horses, etc., then I think you should really consider what you're watching. Because when you look for zoos in the furry fandom, it is almost always people that look at level 1 and level 2 feral art, which obviously makes sense when you think about it, but that most openly zoos already look at feral art, then it also makes me wonder how many people that like feral are also secretly zoos, that is also looking at the real stuff behind the scenes. But here also the question when you look at drawn zoo stuff, does that make you a zoo? The answer is no, but I do think you have zoo tendencies and are very borderline. Here's the thing, I have made this argument before, but I will do it again. I do not think it is a good idea to compare drawings to someone actually watching or doing the real act. Because if you're going to expand one word definition, that means other words will be expanded as well. Because people will just use the double standard argument then. Like, should we call people that draw gore, then label them as actual murderers? Should we label people that like cub art to actual real life predators? People that create fictional racism because of their storytelling to actual racist? You cause a genocide in an alternative history strategy game. Does that make you a person that support actual genocide? You play shooter games to encourage gun violence. You see what I mean now, and why broadening words will just cause more problems than good? But what you can absolutely say is that these people are looking at drawn zoo art. That can't be argued. The same can be said about the rest. Like you game ending people in a video game. Yes, you're game ending people in a video game, but that doesn't make you an actual murderer, does it? I'm not the type of guy that believes in censorship, and you should be able to express whatever artistic freedom you want. But don't take me wrong, this kind of art should really be questioned and face criticism. Why I think you shouldn't watch feral is because from what I've seen, I think there's a high risk that you could lead down the path of becoming an actual zoo, or you are a person that is already a zoo watching this. Sure, it is probably better to let zoos consume feral art rather than real life animals, but then it comes to question, if you consume these extreme types of art already, isn't it just better than at this point just quit altogether? Because one of the most common symptoms when having a addiction is that you start to crave for more and more extreme stuff. And I think many that consume feral are people that started small, which eventually led to this feral content, and may also lead to becoming a real life zoo. This is just speculation and me theorizing. I do not have analytics for this, and again, I'm not a psychologist or anything. I'm not a qualified person to talk about this. Anyway, if you're a person that watches feral depicting level 1, 2 and some degree 3, and if you're still going to watch feral after this video, I'm not here to tell you to stop. I'm neither qualified to tell you this, nor have the research. The only thing I want from you is that you condemn real life zoo. Make it loud and clear. And I'm being serious, because if you all feral folks openly say you're against real life zoo, I believe there will be less people like this lurking around. It is important you people make the distinction to let people know there's a limit you will never cross. Hi everyone, if you made this far, consider subscribing, liking and commenting below the video. And I want to say thank you Kumu, Sulshi the Merchant and Dragon Slayer for being my patrons. Thank you so much for your generous support. I also wish you all a great day and thank you for watching.